And then we decided it was time to tell the story of the eaters. It was an interesting kind of challenge, actually, getting eaters to the book, so to speak, because we really wanted a very diverse demographic, and to make sure that there was something for everybody in the book. And we told the stories of, remote and rural and regional and urban eaters, with all different stories in terms of their socioeconomic spread and their racial spread and their families, or we wanted everything. And we didn't get everything, I'm not going to lie, and what we actually got was heaps of middle-class women like me, who mostly urban though. And fortunately, it was a lot more, and we actually got enough spread where I think we do have a good diversity from remote, rural, urban, regional. We've got Kaylee. I don't know if Kaylee's joining tonight. Is she, Jess?
I just got a text from her. She's not going to make it home in time, but sends her love.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. So we've got one voice of First Peoples in there, Kaylee, and it's a wonderful chapter. They all are, I think. I'm going to let them tell you more about it now. I'm going to stop talking, and I'm actually not going to probably say much at all unless I have questions. I'm just going to thank everyone on the committee and all the authors for getting us to this point. We're at just over $20,000 on the crowdfunding campaign with a week to go. So if everyone could share it through your networks, yesterday, in the last few days, it's really been popping. I'm feeling better that we're going to get there. And now if Costa turns up, by the way, he will start asking questions, but his schedule makes mine look lazy. So I suspect he's caught in a cab somewhere or something on the way from the airport. I'm going to hand over, well, should I point to you based on where you are on my screen? We're going to have the authors first say something about themselves and their story, kind of the biggest challenge and the biggest benefit of trying to eat from where they are. So Jess is still letting people in, so I might give her a break for a second. And Jess, I can take over that role too. And I might start with Sherilyn.
Sorry, yeah, give me a couple minutes.
Okay.
Costa's
Sherilyn, are you okay to?
Costa's trying to get in. He's asked on Facebook, is there a Zoom link? And I tried to put it in, but I can only put in the event right.
I'll send it to him.
Stupid. Thank you. He's trying to get in. Of course he is. He's coming through the Facebook door instead of the Zoom door. So, Sherilyn, I just realized I asked if you wanted to go first, but you've got kids going to bed too. Is this the best time for you, or do you want to go later?
Yeah, sorry, I can go.
Okay, great.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sherilyn, and we live in Meanjin in Brisbane. Pretty inner city, suburban block of land that we rent. Big old house. I live with my husband and 4 young children, and we've got chooks in the backyard. And even though we are pretty urban, it's nice and green around here, lots of parks and wildlife. So we, I suppose, actually reading over some of the other parts of the book, I was just maybe overwhelmed with how spoiled I am for choice. Being so close to the city, but also only half an hour to get to really amazing farms. So I think I definitely take that choice for granted. I'm not currently working. My husband works 2 different jobs. My main job is on the home front with the kids and everything that entails. So I do feel like I've got a bit more flexibility to source produce and to grow a few things. And I definitely feel like choice is a real privilege that we have a fair bit of. So is that, don't want to go on too long, but I feel very humbled to be in the book. I feel like I probably don't belong with some of the amazing people here, but I've always been passionate about doing my little bits here and there, using the choices that I do have to try and make a change. Yeah.
Thanks, Sherilyn. That was great. And actually, I mean, I would say, I think that working in the home sphere and in looking after the children and doing all of the provisioning that you do is absolutely work. It's just not capitalist work. It's not recognized in the capitalist economy. So
Yeah.
congratulations for all that you are doing. And we look forward to hearing more over the course. Costa has joined us. I've seen you before. We've just started, Costa, with a round of just welcome. And now Sherilyn has given a first talk about where she is and the luxury of choice, relatively speaking, where she is. I have to say too, Sherilyn, having just driven through the desert myself and going through where Penny lives, and Hannah also, who's in the book, through those kind of areas, I got to see a bit of that firsthand about how food deserts actually look like in remote areas. It's pretty awful. Even just to visit. So I agree with you. It is quite a luxury that the capitalist economy is not affording many people in lots of places. So Costa, can I hand over you to be the MC with the mostest?
Hey, well, thank you. I just was struggling getting the Zoom link for whatever reason, but I managed to catch Sherilyn, and I would say, Sherilyn, that no, you definitely deserve to be in the book, because it is about it's about everyone, and everyone's story matters, because you relate and connect with a whole network of people of your own, and when people see you doing what you're doing, that's what matters. So I love the fact that the book has so many varied individuals, groups, just that whole mix, because that's the only way that we can get the message out there through a big range of people. Oh, I can't hear you. Can you hear me, Tammy?
Yep, I can hear you. So now I reckon if you want to just nominate from who you see on your screen of the authors on the book, who could go next. I think Jess wants to go a little bit later than the others because she's helping let people in. But like I said, Jess, I can do that now. So you can stop having to worry about the Zoom.
Yeah.
Or are you on a phone? Is it hard for you to see, Costa?
Yeah, I'll have to try and transfer to my computer, because
that's okay. I can name them for who to go next, and then you can do the interactions, and I'll just call who it is. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. All right. I've got Lucy next then.
Okay. Hello, Lucy.
Hi, Costa. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. So I'm here on Ngunnawal Ngambri country in Canberra. So I came into the food system by way of the hospitality industry. So I initially trained as a chef. I'm no longer a chef, but still really interested in food and in the food system and how we kind of all fit into it. We were talking a little bit about the challenges and opportunities that our food choices sort of lead us to. And I think something that I see a lot of in Canberra is we're a very privileged city, we're a relatively wealthy city, a relatively well-educated city. So there are a lot of people who could financially make the choice to move away from supermarkets, who maybe would like to in theory, but it's the time and the energy that people often struggle with in terms of challenges of engaging differently with the food system. But I think for me, that journey has led me to the opportunity of really finding community. And so I do a bit of volunteering with the local food co-op, and in doing so I've really found a community of other eaters and other people I can really relate to, and that's an opportunity that you just don't get if you're shopping at a supermarket, right? You don't make friends at Woolworths, but I've really made friends at the food co-op. So yeah, that's a little bit about me and my story. Thanks.
Wow, that's a really valuable detail, just a connection, because we realise how rote we've become. Just turn up at this place, be pushed down the aisles the way they want you to go down the aisles, to buy, in many ways, buy what they want you to buy because they put all sorts of signage and so on. And you know, I love the fact that you've come out of hospitality, and you've got that human connection in your story about that side of it that is really what this is driving at, that we need to bring the humans back into our food system. We need to bring that face that name, like, and not just the name, but the regularity of connection, not the indifference and distance. So thanks for bringing that detail up, because that's a really rich vein of people's connection to food through hospitality. And, you know, the more we tap into that, the more we can illustrate to people that, you know, buying food and understanding the food system is where they get their power. Thanks, Lucy.
I also think that was such a good line. You don't make friends in the Isles of Woolies. It's so true. Yeah. But you do in other places, don't you? Vicky, I've got you next on my screen. But you're on mute.
Hello. Yeah, thanks. I'm live in Melbourne, Naarm, and I have well, like Lucy, and I'm sorry, a bit like Sherilyn, sorry. I live in an urban environment and therefore have a lot of choice regarding food. I live in inner city Northcote, which is I mean, I don't ever patronize a big supermarket, and probably haven't for about 30 odd years, but so we have access to, you know, decent food shops. We actually have an allotment. Having lived in England for a number of years, I still call them allotments, okay? You know, down at our community garden. And so we're able to grow quite a lot of our own produce, my partner and I, and we visit the local farmers markets in Coburg most Saturday mornings, where we have, it's wonderful because we get what we don't grow. We tend to buy in the vegetables and fruit, vegetables especially, we buy at the farmers market, and the quality is obviously very good. It's organic, and we also, what meat we eat, we're not big meat eaters, but we get very good quality meat from local producers at the farmers market. It's great to have that relationship with the producers. We talk to them and about the weather and how their animals are doing and all the rest of it. And what I've noticed also is that during COVID, especially when the supermarkets had shortages and supply issues, that a lot more people came to the farmers markets than they had prior to COVID. It's amazing how and they've continued to come, because obviously it's value for money. It's such a good, compared to a supermarket, it's such a pleasant experience. And so that's been actually a positive out of a horrible sort of, in Melbourne, where we were locked in lockdown for the best part of 2 years. And yeah, and also reading all the very interesting other stories of the other contributors, it does make me realize how privileged we are. We are here where we live, because of, clearly in places like Alice Springs and other sort of remote areas, it is extremely difficult to eat well. And so it makes me, really appreciate what we've got here. And it's also a stark contrast. I mean, it's wrong, deeply wrong, that there is such inequality in this country about access to food. Yeah. Okay. Let's any more?
No, it's interesting. It's interesting what you said there, Vicky, about like how you're coming at it at a, literally a two-pronged attack, using the farmers market, also using your community garden and doing swaps. It would be interesting to have that next level of information about just how much, not just in dollars and cents, but volumes, where the volumes come from in terms of what you buy, as an example. Because I think the biggest thing, and this is why the book is so important, is we need this data of the alternative system and the alternatives for people to latch onto. And, you know, you saying how you haven't been literally buying in that mainstream paradigm for 30 years, that this is a very valuable perspective.
Well, I'm fortunate that I've got that choice.
Yeah, that's right. But you've also made it and developed it and you know, not just survived by it, you're driven by it. And for people to know your example and to hear it is very important, because we need those role models within an alternative model, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I know. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I mean, a lot of people around here who do obviously have that choice, but for lack of time, possibly, and lack of interest also, you know, have Coles at home delivery. You know what I mean? You know, in this immediate area. So yeah, even when you do have the choice, a lot of people don't make it. They just, and even don't, you know, just have home delivery from Coles, etc. Yeah. So I mean, how dreary is that? But anyway, because I mean, if you enjoy food and enjoy cooking, as I do, I like to have direct contact with the actual growing of it, and also buying it from, you know, the people who produce it. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. There's plenty of really valuable information there for people to latch onto.
Thanks, Costa.
No worries, Vicky.
Okay.
Right, thanks. And I'll be your occasional popping up as your resident anti-capitalist and say, actually, what you're doing is quite important. You know, you're withdrawing consent from the hegemony of the capitalist system. And so while you do have the privilege to be able to make that choice, it's a genuine action that you're making. And withdrawing consent from those things is something that we need more people to do, right, who have the options. So yeah, that's very inspiring, I reckon. Thanks, Vicky.
And just an aside, sorry. People think that going to the farmer's market is expensive. It actually isn't. It's value for money. And I think supermarkets, mind you, I haven't been in Coles for so long, I wouldn't know, but I think the prices are here are pretty high. And things don't last. I mean, if you buy something, it'll last a week in the fridge, you know, a celery or whatever. Whereas from the supermarket, people complain that things don't last more than a couple of days because they've been in cold storage, etc. Whereas, you know, from the farmer's market, they've been harvested the day before. That's right. So there's no wastage, in other words, you know.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, anyway.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm going to go back up to Jess, who's in the top left corner of my screen, and it's bothering me that I haven't gone to you yet. So
yeah, no worries. Hello, everyone. Lovely to meet you if I haven't met you already. My name's Jess. I'm joining today from Costa country. So on the Redlands coast, just outside of Meanjin in Brisbane. I'm also the general coordinator here at AFSA. So I guess my journey into food sovereignty is actually far from perfect. My chapter that's featured in Eating Democracy actually took a bit of an unexpected turn for me, but kind of looking at the shifts that we've collectively faced over the past 3 years kind of coincided with two major life events for me. So the first was recovering from a decade-long alcohol addiction, which was quite a difficult story for me to share. And I guess kind of loss of self and loss of connection that I experienced through addiction to alcohol was pretty intense for me. But then kind of through that sobriety journey, I decided to quit my full-time job, take that stress out of my life, and go back to study full-time. So I started studying a Master of Environment at Griffith University. And through there, just kind of piqued my curiosity about food and agricultural systems. And through there, kind of started researching about agroecology and food sovereignty. And I think because of my kind of background in journalism and policy, which is where I was working in Sydney, I have a real kind of hunger for the social aspect of climate change and the kinds of transformations that we need to push for, which is where that alignment with agroecology and food sovereignty comes through. And through my research, I started working as the admin officer here at AFSA, and then 6 months later became the general coordinator. So that story, I guess, like my journey through sobriety and then finding connection in this organisation through this community is so integral to my personal journey. But then I also hope that my chapter looks at, you know, the role of alcohol and big alcohol on a more systemic level through that food sovereignty lens. And hopefully that resonates with other people who might be in a similar situation to me. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of other stories in this book that I'm really excited to kind of share with the world. And yeah, happy to answer any questions if you have any later on.
Wow, thanks, Jess. That's I know that every angle, every story is bringing a different angle, and that's a really important one, because there's so many layers of addiction that are out there. Alcohol is one of the suite of things, and you only need to look at gambling and the impact that has on households and families when things go off the rails, and that puts even more pressure on home budgets and food selection, and then what we end up doing is getting into that convenience spiral, and the convenience spiral is incredibly expensive, which people don't fully appreciate, that they're getting absolutely fleeced when they're buying conveniently, be that as takeaway, or even be that as elements of the supermarket chains. So that layer of your story is an important one to have been shared. So thank you for doing that, because there's a lot of people that are grappling with different aspects of that across community, and every chance that people get to see the human side of it, it helps them manage and in many ways be proactively preventative as well. So thanks for incorporating that, because this is what it's about. It's not just a book. A book is just a crowbar. It's a fulcrum to shift stuff, and already, just off the four of you who have spoken, we've got such a rich diversity of angles for people to come in at, and that's what we need if we're going to bring lots of people along for the journey. So thank you for sharing.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jess. And also, for those who are unaware, Jess is also the actual engine room of AFSA, and keeps all of our work flowing when others disappear from making sure things get done. And we are wildly appreciative of her commitment and her skills and capacities. So it's nice to have you in the book too, Jess. Ruth, I've got you next on my screen. Would you like to tell us a bit about Ruth and your significant other, food?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Ruth, and I currently live on the southern tablelands outside of Canberra. It's been amazing hearing everyone else's stories and reading everyone else's chapter, because although they're all so different, there's certain commonalities. Like, I can relate in some way to everyone else's story, and I love that. Like, I feel really connected to that. And a large part of my food journey has always been about connections and about community. And I've had the opportunity to see the food system from lots of different angles, to work in farming, to study in that area as well, to work in hospitality and in feeding people, to work in I currently work now with a food and farming network that it works on helping people access local food systems as much as possible, and doing some work with AFSA, and a very short stint of international work with AFSA as well. So I've had a lot of different ways of looking at the food system, but for me, the biggest change in my life was when I very unexpectedly had a child. It was not part of my life plan, and then I had a person I had to give the best start in life to, and I felt that the way we feed people, not just in what we're putting in our mouths, but in our communities and in our cultures, I needed to do something really special to bring a life into the world and make their life really rich. And so that started my really intense dive into food and culture, and how I could do that better in my own life and for her life. I think for me, I've found the biggest challenge in all of that in the food system that we have is, yes, we have a great deal of choice and we can get some amazing food. And like, I'm really spoiled for choice where we are, but there's huge barriers in legislation and in regulation to certain foods that people aren't allowed to access, and they don't have that choice. And a lot of the time, a lot of our smaller farmers can't farm the way that they connect with the land and they feel most appropriate to care for the land and to care for their animals and their plants because of legislation that is preventing them from doing that. Particularly close to my heart is I have worked with cows for a number of years and I love to have raw milk, and I'm not going to buy milk in a plastic bottle in the supermarket, and I can't drink what I want because it's illegal, even if I had it in my own home, in my own farm. So for me, that is the biggest challenge in our current food system, is that we aren't always given, we're given a lot of choice, but that choice stops at a certain point and then we're told this is how it's going to be.
Yeah, well, wow, you've really touched on a lot there, and I connected particularly with that point where you said having a child really changes not so much the urgency, but just the reality around how, you know, what you give them to put in their body. and you know, different when you're working and you're going, oh, you know, well, I'm doing this and I'm working on that. And whereas when you suddenly got responsibility for this other life that doesn't have the experience and the knowledge and the choices, you know, that really does shift your food culture, because you want to create this culture around food and life for this new little life. So I really appreciated that. And I think that's a big one, because there's so many families that don't necessarily have access to the alternative. And so they just get caught in the convenience culture and they get sold, you know, a very limited reality, even though it's bracketed as the ultimate convenience lifestyle, but we know that it isn't. So yeah, thanks for bringing that level of the story to us. So I really appreciated hearing that.
Awesome, thanks. And obviously, Ruth, you know how much I agree with you about raw milk. And also about how it changes when you bring life into the world, the need to care for that life. And I've got Ashley next, ready to tell us your story.
Hi everyone, it's lovely to see everyone and connect. So I'm Ashley. I live on Yuin country in southeast New South Wales, home of Walbunja and Brinja Yuin people. So near to Batemans Bay, close to Eliza as well, and hi to Jess too. So I guess I'm not really sure where to start, but probably the main thing is kind of the roots of my life, which is being a second generation Fiji Indian migrant. Food is life. Food is everything to us. It's such a massive part of how we connect to each other and how we connect to the world around us, and particularly to our culture. So yeah, that's a huge thing, and that's influenced my food journey massively, especially being here and kind of straddling two cultures in a way as well, and having that having our cultural food as a vehicle into connecting with my ancestors and my heritage, and really feeling through that rather than, you know, more than just about what you learn or what you know or the stories that you're told, but really feeling that through the food that we eat and share together. And then I guess the other perspective that I come at things is from the work that I do, which is youth development. So I work with young people kind of in a broad community sense and try to bring them positive, ongoing, long-term change. That's about as concise as I can whittle it down to. So that really means responding to them and responding to their circumstances and supporting them in, you know, a number of different ways, trying to look at the big picture, look at the small picture, and, you know, make life great for them. And I do work with a lot of young people who experience a lot of disadvantage, who, you know, it's been really interesting to hear the perspectives of some of the other people in the group, you know, potentially coming from more privileged communities or more privileged environments, and potentially particularly urban environments. Whereas, you know, what I'm seeing is a lot of really dysregulated, a lot of really young people who are really struggling, and who are really struggling to do what they need to do on a daily basis, and, you know, might come from a number of generations of income inequality, poverty, racism, structural influences that really impact on their ability to absorb this kind of information about you know, about food and where it comes from, and how great it can be for your life and your well-being. So looking at the balance of that, I guess, and understanding how to work with the community when we're we're really dealing with a lot. We're really dealing with a lot of different influences coming together. And yeah, trying to, I guess, balance that with my personal experience of, you know, loving cooking and eating food and sharing food. So yeah, really excited to, you know, kind of be part of this experience and learn about this from the perspectives of other people as well.
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. I mean, the thing that strikes me the most out of what you're talking about is just that capacity to respond and not react in situations through the work that you do, but then also through your own cultural experiences in adapting, you know, and living in different worlds and bringing them together. And I suppose that's really what we're all doing with this broader project, and our capacity to respond to the brick walls and to the stonewalling and to the reactions that people will have to some of the things that we talk about. You know, that capacity to just be responsive and allow conversation and information to exchange. And as you said, you know, you've got the good fortune of having multiple cultures, and those cultures are so heavily embedded around food and communication around food that it brings, you know, your ability to be responsive, you know, to the fore, really, because, you know, I feel a bit the same. You know, I mean, I grew up with a Greek background, and I know how that importance of food has always, you know, that's been the backbone. It's not where are you going, it's what you're going to eat. and you know, they were the questions. They were the questions that were always asked. So no, thanks for sharing. That's wonderful angles coming out. That's brilliant.
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. I feel the same, and I'm always really grateful when somebody can bring the voices of people who aren't here in the meeting, you know, in the session, and remind people that it's not all, you know, Melbourne's inner suburbs or whatever it might be. It's always, yeah, that's incredibly useful, I think, to all of us, or my farm for that matter. You know, like, it's pretty good to eat here, but it's a very different story. I think, actually, if I'm not mistaken, Costa, that the others weren't able to come. I don't see Olive, Hannah, Kaylee, or Simon. Am I right?
Yep, it's just us.
Okay, so that's our interest from all the contributors. So what are your thoughts, Costa? Where do you want to take this discussion for the next 23 minutes?
Oh, I think it'd be nice to sort of see if there's any cross questions from everyone who's just spoken of each other, and then out of that, let's take it to any questions from the floor and kind of bounce it around. But like, I suppose the simplest question would be, what themes are you each seeing coming through, and how's that influencing what we're trying to do? Just as a broad brush throw to each of you to have a bit of a cross pollinate of what you've just heard, given that you've all been in the same seat of contributing, but you're driving from a different position.
Can I start?
Yeah.
I'd love to ask Vicky about her work exploring the role of food and feminism, or the connection between food and feminism.
Sorry, who's asking this?
It's me, it's Jess.
Oh, hi, Jess. Hi. Sorry, what was it? You like to know?
Yeah, a bit
yes.
about your work or your background, kind of exploring the connection between food and feminism.
Right. Yeah. Well, I've always, as I said, in the chapter, that I've always had a love of good cooking and food. I come from an English background, but despite the general belief that English food is not good, it's not true. My mother was an excellent cook, but I write about that in a book I've written, actually. I don't want, I go, a bit of self-promotion. Women's Food Matters, which is published by Palgrave. It certainly it was based on my PhD, which I completed in 2008, but very much updated and all the rest of it. But so which combines, which talks precisely about women's role in food production and preparation. So I could spend a lot of time talking about it, but the point is, so I think I've come from a background of good food. I've been lucky. I grew up in a rural environment on the outskirts of Melbourne, down on the Mornington Peninsula, which is now just a suburb now, a suburb of Melbourne, ever extending onto good agricultural land. That's another story. And I lived overseas from about the age of 20 to 20 years, 40. In France as an au pair for a while, and then Holland for a bit, and then in England for most of the rest of the time, and the US for a while, because my family was living there at the time too. So I've experienced quite a few different food cultures, but it was in England that during the 70s, that I became a feminist. And it wasn't, food in feminism wasn't considered important. I always had this sort of guilty secret, I love good cooking. Really interested in food, but it's not something you talk about, when you're talking about, it's like it was a side issue. But I became increasingly aware, especially when I did a PhD. I wanted to explore women's role in food, not just in cooking, but also in growing food, and the fact that women's food work is so taken for granted and invisible, and how, for instance, male chefs get all the accolades, and it's often based on women's domestic cooking, but obviously elaborated, and women just don't get the usual thing, that women are invisible and throughout history. But what I talking about food production, that was really interesting, because in my research and stuff, I found that women, especially in the rural, and not so much in the capitalist West, but traditionally for instance, in England before the Industrial Revolution, women were the main food producers on a small scale, and there was a thriving food culture, which was essentially killed off by the Industrial Revolution, when people were forced off the land by the enclosure system, which I don't know if you know about, but anyway, where wealthy landowners threw people off the land so they could have these massive sheep runs and things like that. And so people were disconnected from their roots, or their rural roots, which is when, and that's of course happening now throughout much of the world, the global South. But even so, women are the main growers of food. This is a really interesting thing, that women's domestic food production is, well, this is a statistic and people don't believe it, but it's actually 70% of the world's food is that people eat, at home is grown by women, and so it's not from the capitalist system. That we are talking about particularly the global south, but also parts of Europe and, still, and food cultures are basically a result of women's home cooking. This is, and that's not given enough, it's not even recognized really, how what women grow, they cook, so out of that has become food cultures, which are not necessary, and the whole idea of national food cultures is an artificial thing anyway. It's regional food cultures, the idea of national food cultures is a bit, well, nationalistic maybe, but you know what I mean? It's and a fascinating, I did quite a lot of work on ethnobotany, feminist ethnobotanists. And there's somebody called Patricia Howard. She's an American that works at Wageningen University in the Netherlands. I think she's retired now, but she's done really interesting work. There's a very good book called Women and Plants, which is a collection of, it's really worth getting actually, which is not just by her, but a whole lot of ethnobotanists. You got it? Yeah, no, anyway. And in it, she says women's home gardens, and that means, they're called home gardens especially in the global south, where they grow their own food for home consumption, is the biggest source of cultivated biodiversity in the world. Cultivated biodiversity. People just don't know this, and I just think it's really incredible that, because they do all that. They save the seeds, they exchange, they try new things, new plants, and experiment, and it's all sort of not known except by a few feminist ethnobotanists, and so that's really been much of what inspired me to write the book, so just there are so many aspects of it. I mean, of women's role in food, and also I suppose the cult of the celebrity chef is something I'm very critical of too, you see, as it's because how men have taken over cooking as their the one domestic activity that's interesting actually, and to show off their cookery skills, and how they get all the accolades, and women's cooking is just sort of taken for granted, but who's cleaning the toilets and making the beds and things? I don't think it's the men, and there might be a few rare examples, but really they do the interesting things, and cooking is creative, and it's not everyday cooking they tend to do anyway. It's the sort of special occasion stuff, and get all the accolades, etc. And women just sort of go unrecognized and unappreciated. No, so that's my feminist angle. I mean, there's a lot more in the book, but obviously, and well, that's so I bring a feminist lens to women's role in food, world of food. Yeah. Mm.
Isn't it interesting that the things you're talking about there are so many of the things that individuals and groups are trying to rekindle, in terms of the idea of the crop swap and the edible garden trails and the community garden, and all of these things that are taken for granted and go under the international radar, that are the local seed swapping groups. These are things that are they're starting to ignite, but they're already the spine and the backbone of what you're talking about, as 70% of the food production for the population of the planet.
Yes, that's right. And yet people believe that the planet can only be fed by industrial agriculture.
Yeah, saved by.
And yet it can't. The industrial agriculture is destroying the planet, actually, with its use of fossil fuels, and it's just the whole industrial capitalist food system is one of the biggest threats to the planet, actually. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
in all kinds of ways. Yeah, yeah.
It's funny, isn't it, that even
Mhm.
the language that's used, like, you know, big ag, it will save. Like it's almost this kind of, well, we know what you need, and we will save you. We will do what you require, even though you didn't require us to do that for you. It's interesting what you're tapping into there, which, you know, all of the stories we're talking about, and everyone that presented is talking about this connection. They're talking about this localization. They're talking about growing with community, the household community, the street community, the local community. Really lovely.
I mean, capitalism, though, sort of reinvents itself the whole time. So it sort of tends to appropriate, you know, the things like, you know, regenerative agriculture. They've sort of appropriated that, and of course, it's not what they're doing, isn't that at all. But it's sort of like it keeps it sort of appropriates everything and sort of and then keeps going. You know what I mean? And just it's just, I mean, the issue around seeds, for instance. I mean, the basis of food sovereignty is seed biodiversity, and of course, big business wants to control all the seeds, you know, and so people can't, you know, whereas the basis of biodiversity and culinary diversity, in fact, is based on control of seeds, you know, which is being taken away. Isn't it something, Tammy must know this, but almost that like in the last 100 years or whatever, something like 75% or maybe more of the world's plant biodiversity, you know, vegetables and fruit, have gone. It's vanished, you know. Yeah. And it's sorry.
We had an interesting example of this in Canberra recently, where government chose to give funding to a sort of an interstate organisation because they had a seed program and they would send seeds to people to grow food for the first time, and sort of all of these things. And the community came back and said, actually, we already have a Seed Savers collective in Canberra, and we already have community organisations and grassroots organisations of people who are sharing seed with each other, you know, seed which has been grown and evolved and saved in this climate, so it's really climatically specific. You know, we'd really like to see support for these endeavours, but the government, you know, sort of found more value in a shiny website that would send out a packet of seed with a QR code that had been, you know, grown somewhere else in Australia, rather than supporting those local community organisations. So
Interesting.
it can be really disheartening when we see the community and the grassroots organisations that we are trying so hard to cultivate are not always valued by the system, right? So even though as individuals and as communities we're working really hard to make change, it can be frustrating that governments and systems don't always want to play along with that.
And yes, I know. And I mean, I don't want to continue to dominate, you know, somebody else can, but I'm just saying that industrial agriculture is probably is a huge contributor to climate change, and yet our food system is now under threat from our food supply, and biodiversity is so now under threat from, you know, runaway climate change. It's just terrifying, really. Anyway, I won't continue. I don't want to take over completely.
No, thank you. Thank you for those perspectives.
Thanks, Costa.
Did anyone else want to add something? Ash, did you want to throw anything in there in response to sort of what you've heard?
Yeah, look, I just had to take a little break, actually. Sorry, to grab my charger, so I missed a little bit of that. But yeah, look, it's particularly I think I really responded to what Vicky was saying about the connection between, particularly obviously in the global south, the connection between women and growing food and food culture. I think it's something that I think we're sort of kind of circulating around, you know, the idea that it's more of an unlearning than a learning that we need. You know, it's coming back to those traditional, natural ways of doing things, which is, you know, being local but cooking and sharing and trading and creating and exploring with food. And particularly, I know definitely in my background, in my family, that's exactly how members of my family cook and grow and eat. And it's so simple and it's so joyous, and, you know, that's how everyone comes together. So I really like that, you know, that kind of reflection that's, like I kind of understood, I guess, that the value in that, those small scale connections, and that those many small scale sort of operations and cultivations add up to an enormous majority. And that's really powerful and special, I think.
Yes, it's there's a lot of interesting Costa, you might be interested in a book, somebody called by David Sutton, who's an academic, but he writes about women's cooking in Kalymnos. That's what his, you know, it's fascinating, you know, about home cooking. His whole career is built as an anthropologist on studying the culture of Kalymnos and women's domestic cooking. You know, it's quite really interesting. David Sutton, actually, it's thanks to him I got this published. He gave me a very good review. Yeah. Wow. Anyway, yeah, that's enough of me. Yeah.
I really like that point Ashley just made about unlearning. I think that's a huge thing that we have to do to transform our food system from what it is at the moment to something that is more nourishing. I think we've all been taught that a tomato should be round and red and perfect and not get bruised when you stick it in your shopping bag. And we've all been taught that certain foods are unsafe if they're packaged in certain ways or grown in certain ways that traditionally and culturally we've been doing for 1,000 years, but all of a sudden these things are unsafe because they don't fit in with this conventional industrial food system that we're living in. And we as a people need to unlearn that these things that we've been told about food safety and appearance and methods of growing. And I really like that. Thank you. Unlearning.
Yeah. It's a really valid point, because then, you know, on top of what you're saying, there's then all of the process and all of the regulation and all of the rules and laws and sub-laws that hold that new learning up and keep all the old ways at bay by saying, oh no, well, you can't have, whether it's your milk, or you can't do, you know, you can't slaughter, you know, the own whatever it is that you've grown on your farm. It has to go somewhere else and travel a long distance, and it has to fit, you know. I mean, Tammy knows all about this. She's right in the thick of that. But it's exactly that point that the system then holds itself stronger by building regulation and blocking out these things. So our capacity to break through to people, to illustrate that there is alternative, that these options exist, and that what you've learned is not the gospel. It's only been, you know, when you think about the advent of, you know, super marketing, you know, that's you know, the better part of 50 years, if, you know, or thereabouts, maybe 60 at the most. It's not a long time when you think about how long the planet has been feeding people. It's not even a drop in a bucket, but it's got such a stranglehold, as you mentioned, that you know, we need to create these examples to illustrate to people that unlearning. I agree. It's a great turn of phrase that we can use.
Yeah, I just have to say, I want to endorse all of that too. The unlearning, the relearning, the reimagining, they're all really important ways of being. And there's a wonderful bit of work done by some academics. It's actually two women who are collectively known as Gibson Graham, and they write under a pen name together. But the academic texts, The End of Capitalism as We Knew It and Post-Capitalist Politics, are pretty dense. If you're into that, I recommend them. But if you're less into that, I'm just going to pop it in the chat. There's a they have a whole thing about community economies, and I haven't read it, but I gather there's a more popular text about what that means. And so the community economies they talk about are all of these wonderful ways that people do barter and share and cook for each other. And like one of the books that I read of this, I remember talks about asking the mining communities out in Gippsland when Latrobe Valley shut down all the mines. You know, they were expressing all this grief about the loss of an industry that was obviously a terrible industry, but it destroyed people's lives, losing the capacity for work. And everyone was really feeling grief and anger about these things. And then they started asking them about, well, what is happening in the community though? Because they're all like, we're not working, we're not employed. And they started asking about examples of what was happening. And this speaks to Sherilyn's thing about not working. Like, of course you work. And it told the story of things like the woman who was making lap quilts for the aged care home from scraps of fabric that locals would bring to her as a thank you for them caring for her husband in the last days of his life. Things about sharing food around the community when somebody needed, a food train because of being ill. All of these diverse economies, community economies that are taking place all the time under the radar. And I think we're actually live on Facebook, so I shouldn't probably tell some of the things that I would recommend you also do. But basically, stay under the radar. James C. Scott famously said, the role of the peasant is to stay out of the archives. And community economies mostly stay out of the archives. And that's not a bad thing, but you've got to have communities telling stories together about this unlearning and relearning and doing things together to find ways to feed each other, in terms of actual food and also in other nourishing ways. So I commend the community economies to all of you to have a look at and think about the ways that your communities can stay out of the archives and keep building more of those sort of things.
Thanks, Demi. Did anyone else want to add to that last thought?
I just had a quick thought about how central community is, and how you hear a lot about sort of the loneliness epidemic these days, just across a whole bunch of services, and maybe that's because people are just doing their Woolies order online, and people have lost context to have community, and food is just such an essential part of life. And if we can have community without eating, that that just can transform so much. I just wonder if anyone else has made the connection between food and community as an antidote to loneliness and isolation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I covered it a bit in my chapter in terms of I guess the rise of like food delivery services like Uber and things like that. And also I guess kind of linking to my personal story, the really alarming rise in people using alcohol delivery services. So there are people in Australia right now that are getting all of their food and alcohol like delivered to them on a daily basis, or more than once a week. And that to me is just really worrying, like that we're not kind of meeting up with friends and loved ones and kind of breaking bread with one another and connecting. It's a real shame to me, but also speaking to, I guess, a lot of the fear and isolation that's happened over the past 3 years. So I think food can remedy that.
That reality around delivery is massive. Like, I know friends in business and they got people regularly just ring up to get a coffee delivered. Like, seriously, like a coffee delivered one block. And he says like it's just an all pervading escape clause, which is creating that isolation. I agree. And you know, and this isn't even a restaurant. This is just a coffee. The coffee is part of the chocolate shop, you know, and this is a part of his business that's just like people just want delivery, you know, and they are more and more isolated, and that isolation is creating all of those social issues, because there's not the interaction, and there's not the communication and the accountability. You know, people are just doing things in a bubble. So yeah, that's a really big one. And so you touched on that in your chapter.
Yeah, and I think a couple of others did. I guess because when we kind of were writing our chapters, we were thinking about the COVID-19 pandemic, and I think there's not a single person who didn't at some stage feel loneliness or isolation, no matter whether if they were living with their family or living alone. It was I guess a time that was fraught with a lot of fear and anxiety for many, and yeah, it's hard to step out of that. I know a lot of people are using these kind of services or convenient services because, you know, they're still scared or kind of developed a fear of like being outside in the world again. So how do we remedy that and, you know, meet up with each other and swap food, or, you know, join a community garden, or, you know, visit our local farmers markets. It's something that we've all got to kind of collectively do together, I think.
I'd just like to say as well, that's a huge thing for young people at the moment. That sort of window of 3 years that they've missed out on a lot of social development has meant that they're extremely anxious and feel very prohibitive about being around other people. They haven't learnt how to, you know, kind of self-soothe that anxiety and overcome the discomfort that they feel around taking risks or taking on social challenges. And it's something that we're seeing across school systems and particularly in our area. And we're recognizing that as and trying to find ways to create more soft opportunities for social connection so that they can start to, you know, kind of build those skills and overcome some of what they've missed out on over the past few years. Yeah, it seems to be very much across the board, but particularly with young people as well.
Yeah, and food is certainly that sort of wall breaker, because everyone's always going to put their hand out for some food, and it leaves big opportunity for us to find those bridges within the context of what each and every one of you have been speaking about. It's there's some the common threads. Just sitting here and listening to all of you come through my phone, I've really enjoyed hearing how multi-layered yet integrated all the comments from all of you, you know, coming from different parts of the country, yet that common ground is strong. And I think that's what will give the book and the message it's cut through. Anything else from anyone? And Tammy, do you have anything you want to tie the ends up with?
Oh, I mean, I should obviously thank you, Costa, for joining us tonight, and everyone who's come along, and the authors who've written such a beautiful book, and Eliza who's illustrated it, and Jess and Adele and Penny and others who've helped with the editing of it. So there's been a lot of work behind all of this, and it's 98% voluntary efforts. Actually, that's the way AFSA works. Speaking of diverse economies, because money doesn't always buy you the best thing, right? And so, as well as thanking everyone, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that, as well as the book coming out, and you should please spread it to your friends and let them know to support the campaign so we get it over the line. We also have the updated People's Food Plan that we've just spent a bit over a year working on, which is like a 200-page document that's advocating for right to food and biodiversity and better planning for farming. We've got a huge range of topics: food safety changes, against ultra processed foods, like so much in it, and it advocates on everything from like the personal and the practical to the political levels, with policy recommendations and individual actions that people can take in their communities. And it's a living document now, so it'll be continue to be developed for some time, but we recommend having a look because we want more people to tell us what you think the food system needs, because a people's food plan needs the people. And we want to keep showing that to the government. So I'd like to, just finish by thanking everyone for coming along. And I'm so excited to see this book in print. I think it's going to be a really great contribution to food sovereignty in Australia for lots of people.
Tammy, is that food plan available now?
Yes, I think did Jess post it there? No, that was the Convergence, and we've got Convergence
in the
coming up in
chat.
October, which she just mentioned. But do you want to just pop the link to the People's Food Plan? The draft is sitting on the AFSA website right now, still open for comment, and we'll be talking about it at Convergence in Maruya on Brinja Yuan country in 21st to 23rd of October.
23rd. Yeah.
So it's a pretty huge piece of work because it's taken several hundred people and a decade to get it here.
Really? Gosh.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Well, congratulations. I mean, that's kind of that next incarnation from the one that was done. Well, when was that? Like
12 years ago, actually.
Yeah.
So it was published in 2012, so 11 years ago. But yeah, it was 2 years in the making. Yeah. You wrote the foreword for that, Costa?
Yeah,
So,
I do remember.
Yep. Yeah,
You
so
know,
we've built on that and then building in another decade of experience in lobbying governments and hearing what communities are doing to kind of eat and grow democratically in their spaces. So it's based on all of that knowledge. And I think it's a pretty important intervention into this space. Oh, and if you're not a member of AFSA, why not? Off you go. You just go join.
Swipe.
Just over there. I don't know. I don't know about these swiping things. So I just click links.
Yeah, exactly. Follow this way. Well, and you know, I mean, none of that thread and none of that incarnation from 2012, and I mean, to have what's being incubated has been a huge process and a journey that you, Tammy, have taken with your role and the amount of international advocacy and work that you've done and the travel that you've done and the people that you've met. But out of those people and those meetings and all of that work, to take the People's Food Plan into this version, this next version is incredible, because, you know, you think to 2012 to where we are now, like the need for the version 2 is so much times more important than or not more important, but I don't want to, what's the word I'm looking for?
It's amazing how we didn't know how bad it was about to get.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like when I left America in 1991 because I thought it was a problem then. It wasn't so bad in 1991 now that I look back on it. So yeah, we need this more than ever for sure. And that international work that you mentioned, Costa, really speaks to some things also, like Vicky was saying, about learning and listening to the Global South, because many of them have maintained non-capitalist or anti-capitalist kind of spaces much better than we have. We're not going back to some prehistoric period. We're showing people who've held on to the enclaves of anti-capitalist and non-capitalist economies and ways of being in the world. And our movement has been hugely strengthened by learning from the movements in the Global South. And we should look to them more clearly for guidance and leadership, which we do.
Here.
Yeah, La Via Campesina, etc.
Yeah, we'll be in Morella, and I will be in Colombia for the Global Assembly of La Via Campesina in December.
Oh, right. Oh, man, how exciting. Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, it will be. All right, everyone. I'm being called for dinner. Probably all of you are too. Let's go eat democratically somewhere if we can. And thanks for coming along. Look forward to seeing anyone who wasn't already a member's name turn up in the list tomorrow when I'm told. And again, thanks to the authors. We really look forward to launching this book with all of your wonderful words in it.
and thanks for putting it together. It's been it's amazing how it's been put together so quickly and, and so well in such a short time.
Like most things, when you take them away from corporations or government, really. So,
Okay. Yeah.
all right. Thanks,
Great.
everyone.
Good night. See
Good
ya.
night.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye. Bye.